Hello, welcome to the Self Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Chapter 8 Social Movements. A great many students and office workers around the world go to work only for 5 or 6 days and rest on the weekends. Yet, very few people who relax on their day off realize that this holiday is the outcome of a long struggle by workers, that the work day should not exceed 8 hours, that men and women should be paid equally for doing the same work, that workers are entitled to social security and pension. These and many other rights were gained through social movements. Social movements have shaped the world we live in and continue to do so. We often assume that the rights we enjoy just happened to exist. It is important to recall the struggles of the past which made these rights possible. You have read about the 19th century social reform movements, of the struggles against caste and gender discrimination, and of the nationalist movement in India that brought us independence from the colonial rule in 1947. You are familiar also with the many nationalist movements around the world in Asia and Africa and Americas that put an end to colonial rule. The socialist movements world over, the civil rights movement in the United States in the 1950s and 1960s that fought for equal rights for black, the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa have all changed the world in fundamental ways. Social movements not only change societies, they also inspire other social movements. You saw in Chapter 3 how the Indian national movement shaped the making of the Indian Constitution, and how, in turn, the Indian Constitution played a major role in bringing about social change. Now, let us move to the next point: features of a social movement. People may damage a bus and attack its driver when the bus has run over a child. This is an isolated incident of protest. Since it flares up and dies down, it is not a social movement. A social movement requires sustained collective action over time. Such action is often directed against the state and takes the form of demanding changes in social state policy or practice. Spontaneous, disorganized protest cannot be called a social movement either. Collective action must be marked by some degree of organization. This organization may include a leadership and a structure that defines how members relate to each other, make decisions, and carry them out. Those participating in a social movement also have shared objectives and ideologies. A social movement has a general orientation or way of approaching to bring about or to prevent change. These defining features are not constant. They may change over the course of a social movement's life. Social movements often arise with the aim of bringing about changes on a public issue, such as ensuring the right of the tribal population to use the forest or the right of displaced people to settlement and compensation. Think of other issues that social movements have taken up in the past and present. While social movements seek to bring in social change, counter movements sometimes arise in defense of the status quo. There are many instances of such counter movements. When Rajaram Mohan Rai campaigned against sati and formed the Brahmo Samaj, defenders of sati formed Dharam Sabha and petitioned the British not to legislate against sati. When reformers demanded education for girls, many protested that this would be disastrous for society. When reformers campaigned for widow remarriage, they were socially boycotted. When the so called lower caste children enrolled in schools, some so called upper caste children were withdrawn from the schools by their families. Peasant movements have often been brutally suppressed. More recently, the social movements of erstwhile excluded groups like Dalits have often evoked retaliatory action. Likewise, proposals for extending reservation in educational institutions have led to counter movements opposing them. Social movements cannot change society easily, since it goes against both entrenched interests and values. There is bound to be opposition and resistance, but over a period of time, changes do take place. While protest is the most visible form of collective action, our social movement also acts in other equally important ways. Social movement activists hold meetings to mobilize people around the issues that concern them. Such activities help shared understanding and also prepare for a feeling of agreement or consensus about how to pursue the collective agenda. Social movements also chart out campaigns that include lobbying with the government, media, and other important makers of public opinion. You will recall this discussion from chapter 3. Social movements also developed distinct modes of protest. This could be candle and torch light processions, use of black cloth, street theatres, songs, poetry. Gandhi adopted novel ways such as ahimsa, satyagraha, and his use of the charkha in the freedom movement. Recall the innovative modes of protest such as picketing and the defying of the colonial ban on producing salt. Now let us move to the next point, distinguishing social change and social movement. It is important to distinguish between the social change in general and social movement. Social change is continuous and ongoing. The broad historical processes of social change are the sum total of countless individual and collective actions gathered across time and space. Social movements are directed towards some specific goals. It involves long and continuous social effort and action by people. To draw from our discussion in Chapter 2, we can view Sanskritization and Westernization as social change, and see the 19th century social reformers' efforts to change society as social movements. Now, let us wind up the session, and thank you very much for engaging yourself with the Self Learning podcast.